Just a brief overview of the culture and history of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, where they work and live. This culture is rich and complex. Colonisation has had many negative impacts on these cultures and has caused deep intergenerational trauma that we still see today. After Captain Cook arrived in 1788, initial attempts were made both by colonists and Aboriginal peoples to get to know each other in a friendly way. A scene described in a video on the subject describes scenes of English and Aboriginals dancing together hand in hand in the first 2 or 3 days of Captain Cook's landing in January 1788. A diary entry says, "They met us in the most cheerful manner. It was a playground type of encounter and we were checking each other out." Captain Arthur Phillip and Bennelong were two important figures during this time, and they're still written about today, as in this children's book by author Michael Sedonuri. I don't know if I said that right. Phillip was sent to occupy the land because England saw it as a British colony. He brought out lots of supplies, including sheep, cows, bulls, wine, 700 hatchets, 74,000 nails. The fact that Phillip was missing a front tooth endeared him to the Aboriginals because the same tooth was knocked out in their male initiation ceremonies. So in their minds, Phillip was a man who was a respected elder, like the elders in their tribe, and like Bennelong, who was a leader in the Aboriginal community, and he had been initiated in his early 20s. And Bennelong became a kind of spokesperson for Aboriginals and liaised with the non-Aboriginal people. And he and Phillip really did try and build a relationship and a way of living together. So there was a real attempt to live in harmony. Over time, problems arose due to a number of factors, and it became clear to the Aboriginals that these people, the English colonists, were not just visiting, they were staying, and they were trying to make them live like them. This was different to previous groups who had visited, such as the Portuguese in the 1520s and the Spanish in the early 1600s. As the two distinctly different cultures worked the land, there was a misunderstanding. Aboriginals thought that they owned the land, but they didn't. Even as late as 1970, there's a quote that says, people at Arakan were shocked to learn that the government, not they, owned the land. And in many of the pastoral properties, it was seems that Aboriginals thought they were working the land in conjunction with European pastoralists, but this was not the case. And that's a quote from the Australian Law Commission of 2010. As the British claimed the land, the process of dispossession, segregation, and assimilation began. And the effects of these are being felt today and with intergenerational trauma. Dispossession was done in 4 ways. So via the British legal system, physical force, introduced diseases, and psychological violence. Dispossession led to a profound sense of grief because of the relationship Indigenous people have with the land. And this relationship is completely different to the way non-Aboriginal people think of land. Aboriginal people describe the land as their country. And a video by Reconciliation Australia shows an Aboriginal man describing country as where he finds his strength. It's where we revitalise. Another woman described her connection to country as a flame that is always burning to go back and reconnect. This connection with the land and all things on it, including flora and fauna, is beautifully described on a website called Recreating the Country, Totems for Australian. And here's the quote. "I remember watching a Wathaurl man before a welcome to country ceremony following the flight of a screeching sulphur-crested cockatoo. He referred to the bird as his brother and felt comforted by its presence. Another Warrathong elder on a hike along the Moorabool River commented on the wedge-tailed eagle, Bonjali, that had flown along the river valley while he walked. He felt uplifted and he felt safer and reassured by his visit." another point on country, which is just so important. Let's have a listen to this man, Bob Randall, who talks about his profound sense of country.
The relationship and our relationship system for our people here. See, my people see land ownership as being totally different to the English way of ownership. Because ours used to be really the land owns us, and it still is that to us.
Segregation involves separating people from their land, and in the case of Aboriginal people, this was especially traumatic as they have such a profound relationship with their land. And in the late 1800s, the New South Wales government set up the Aboriginal Protection Board, and the very first laws were made to remove Aboriginal people from areas so they would be out of sight and out of mind for non-Aboriginal people. And this was done through reserves, missions and stations. Assimilation means making something similar. The cohabitation of Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people was complicated because the two cultures clashed. A plan was developed by the colonists for Aboriginals to assimilate into non-Aboriginal society. By the 1950s, they realised they were responsible for the life of every Aboriginal and that running reserves, missions and other areas was expensive. This money, they decided, could be spent elsewhere on hospitals, schools and other community facilities. So a plan was developed by which Aboriginals could apply for exemption from existing rules which they were living under, and the exemption would mean they had the right to vote, drink socially and, importantly, keep their wages and property. Really that meant they had to have a stable job, but devastatingly it involved the removal of children from families and placing them to live with non-Aboriginal people. And this is now referred to as the stolen generation. And the trauma of this process has been terrible, as most of us know. It's cast a very long shadow. And this is because it'd be upsetting to anyone, but the sense of kinship and family was extremely important for Aboriginal people, and so some declined the offer. The offer did look reasonable to non-Aboriginals because it had the aim of everyone living in the same way and by extension in peace and harmony. The policy of assimilation that was decided upon at the Native Welfare Conference on 1961 in Canberra stated that assimilation was for the advancement of Australia. Aboriginals were expected eventually to attain the same manner of living as other Australians and enjoy the same responsibilities, observing the same customs and influenced by the same beliefs, hopes and loyalties as other Australians. But really they were aiming to eliminate the culture of Aboriginal people, and I guess that's part of the process of colonisation, which one academic describes as an ongoing structure of domination that swings between elimination and exploitation. Another academic, Paradis, describes intergenerational trauma as a condition, and the symptoms are mourning, survivor guilt, intrusive cognition and emotion. It also affects the children because the parents who are reliving the events are so grieved that they can't parent properly, and other impacts include family violence and marital problems. Issues that impact relationships and communication with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are lack of understanding of communication protocols within Aboriginal culture and changes in social dynamics in tribes due to the education of younger members. The lack of understanding of communication protocols includes, if we take a business approach rather than a person approach, we're not really understanding the high sense of value that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders place on building and maintaining those relationships. And their sense of time is different. So they're not, turning up on the dot of 3 o'clock is not the way they operate. Their family and community relations are really paramount, and sometimes these issues might take precedence over our way of dropping things in order to meet the clock. So it's important to consider flexible meeting times and allow time and space to discuss things. Try not to rush. Also, language. If you're using English, it should be easy to understand, and better still, some of the local dialect. Touch, always seek permission before touching someone, and silence in conversation. Extended period of silence are considered the norm, so allow time for this to occur. And also eye contact. Sometimes, looking at someone directly can be seen as hostile. So really try and gauge with the other people or persons just how they're managing their eye contact. And if they're not looking at you, maybe don't look directly at them. The changes in social dynamics are happening because younger people are now often the ones who are being educated in Western ways of life, including using technology, and they go back to the tribe and teach it to everybody, including the elders. And the elders traditionally hold the authority in the tribes. They're the people who make decisions for the tribe. So that role is suddenly being usurped by the younger ones, and this can cause conflict within the tribe and even confusion and resentment over who should be the person who's liaising with the community service, and then maybe there's a fight and then no one connects with the service at all. 3 aspects of cultural safety and its relationship to cultural awareness and competence. Understanding personal biases is part of cultural safety, and this is different to cultural awareness, which only involves a basic understanding of cultural differences, but lacks a 360 degrees view, and which involves having awareness of one's own cultural identity and values and how they intersect with overall perceptions and understanding of cultures that are different to our own. Legal Aid New South Wales provides the following definition of cultural safety: an environment that is safe for people, where there's no assault, challenge, or denial of their identity or who they are and what they need. It is about shared respect, shared meaning, shared knowledge and experience of learning, living and working together with dignity and truly listening. Have it with you, which involves things like truth-telling, acceptance, respect, learning together about understanding the cultures of Aboriginal people, and acknowledgement of the life experiences of Aboriginal people and communities. Cultural competence builds on cultural awareness by making changes to your own behaviours as a result of understanding your cultural awareness. Cultural safety involves both cultural awareness and competence, and really takes it to the next level, which involves challenging organisational and political structures. These structures often have inequalities and racism deeply embedded in them and can be hard to change. Change often meets resistance anyway, but changing something that's entrenched like this can be really hard due to underlying racism. In fact, today the ABC is conducting a big review of its inclusion policies around Aboriginal people, especially in light of the racism that's been directed at Stan Grant and journalist Tony Armstrong, the sports presenter on ABC Breakfast on TV, because they've committed to really creating a culturally safe environment. That's a quote direct from the Australian newspaper on the 2nd of October. Health Victoria describes the process of cultural safety as being an iterative one that takes place in 4 steps. So you're first of all unaware, then you're emerging, then you're learning and becoming capable, and then you're proficient. So it's a bit like driving a car. You already know it all. You don't really have to keep consciously thinking about it, but you can keep learning. 3 strategies that the service could use to be culturally safe, including how staff are supported to identify their own cultural bias, include training workshops, cultural liaisons and mentors, and reflection practice designed as a continuum with support for each stage. 3 strategies that the service can implement and integrate culturally, you need to evaluate them. So in terms of training, you can look at the feasibility of training in terms of resources, and this includes budget, staff availability, venue. Can you do it on site, or do you have to hire a venue and pay for that? It's important to ask staff for feedback and collate this feedback and integrate it with the continuous improvement cycle, and where you're continuing to develop the content of the training materials. It's like a live document. You can also encourage and empower Aboriginal people by asking them to learn how to teach, and eventually maybe even lead some of the training sessions. This could provide a pathway to work experience because it develops skills and even possible employment. Cultural liaisons and mentors encourage self-determination by asking them for suggestions on how to improve the relationships with the service. Really, it's important to collaborate and build these partnerships, and this helps build respectful relationships and deepens understanding and connections, and importantly, it gives them a sense of ownership, and this leads to empowerment, which leads to action. In terms of reflection practices and evaluating them, it's all very well to say it's a good idea, but it's good to document this when it's being done, checking if it's being done, and looking at it and reflecting and asking staff for feedback. And are the leaders in the Aboriginal community being asked to contribute to the materials, and is that useful? 2 ideas for enhancing cultural safety within the service are to view cultural safety as an ongoing learning process and empower Aboriginal people to do work experience at the organisation in a number of different roles and contribute to the development of the cultural safety plan. This encourages self-determination. Ways to support the delivery of services and programs that are culturally safe and encourage increased participation are making sure services are affordable and in locations that are easy to access. The second one is communications materials are in a English language that are easy to understand, and images and symbols that are really clear of what they mean, and ideally using some of the local dialect. Strategies that will work with local industry to encourage self-determination and community control in services programs can, in order to make sure services are accessible, you could work with local real estate agents to make sure you secure a good location for an office, and transport services in order to make sure travelling to the service is possible, maybe with shuttle buses if people don't have cars. Really developing relationships with local industry by attending local business chamber events, stalls at events and markets, and other community organisations. It's really important to develop knowledge and create relationships with staff at Awabakal, a service in Lake Macquarie. And this offers medical services, including GP, and is available in Lake Macquarie, Newcastle and Port Stephens. And you can ask them for help with navigating the medical Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander access line. And these partnerships can really be developed over time. And when I worked at BHP, we had something called the Local Buying Program. And it involved really helping local businesses, in particular Indigenous businesses, in how to pitch their services to BHP. So we'd get them in front of some specialists who help them put those documents together and really know how to appeal to the decision makers within BHP to really give them the work, give them the contracts, to really have one of the social values framework was to have empowering Indigenous communities. And it was done through a organisation through CRES, and I wonder if there's something similar if that extends to Lake Macquarie and Newcastle. Also, just make sure the communication channels are clear and effective, and that there are good ways to monitor them and see if these mechanisms are efficient. And also just make sure cultural safety and representation in service delivery is happening. And overall, just keep reinforcing how important cultural safety is and see it as a continuing learning process.